a lot of work. There's a big time commitment. And usually the people I work with, they are looking to accomplish a few things. Number one is they want to create another source of income, which is good. They want to create a safety net in the event of the next job loss, right? There's especially certain industries have been cutting back on jobs, job losses and layoffs and things like that. There are other individuals that own businesses that either want to convert their business into a franchise or diversify their investments and maybe add on just purely investment or add on additional income streams. Maybe it's a mom and pop roofing company that wants to offer and add on a franchise that offers painting services or a coverings business where they're able to essentially restore vinyl siding and things like that. So really figuring out, why you want to own a business. Yes, we all want to make more money, but really kind of figuring out what is your why. For me, as an example, and that's something I'm starting to do a lot more is kind of give my story and give some examples. My why was my family. Well, what does that mean? Well, that why, my family basically meant wanted to spend more time with them. I worked on Wall Street, 2003, 4, 5, 6. And with that commute, I was never going to see my family by the time I left at 5:30 in the morning and got home after 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, 5 hour round trip commute. I needed to make a change. So that my why was spending more time with family, flexibility, and, always had the idea of becoming a soccer coach and never missing a soccer game, which is something I got to accomplish. And that was my big accomplishment as a business owner is not just the money, but that time freedom that it created. So some people, I always tell people they're looking for different things, time freedom, financials are more important than time, but time is a close second or vice versa. And that is okay. Everyone's situation is different, but that why is going to be super important because just like in any business, there's going to be bumps in the road and you need that strong enough why to really get you through the ups and downs in any business. So things to consider with the franchise. Number one is you need money to invest. Now, with a startup, the investment could be less, but what happens is that you're figuring out the system. So, what you save, avoiding a franchise fee in a startup, it may take you 2, 3 years to put that business plan together. Whereas a franchise, there are certain businesses that don't require any type of brick and mortar. You're up and running in 90 days or less. So you're really kind of speeding up the process, kind of figuring out, what you have, looking at your financials, always getting your financials in order. So liquid assets, your liquidity, your total assets, your liabilities. So basically, your assets minus your liabilities give you your net worth. The assets also include the liquidity, but how much money do you have to put towards the business? I recommend as a starting point, 50,000 liquid, 100,000 net worth. You're looking at the equity in your home and things like that for the assets, but you need to deduct the mortgage. But that's just a starting point. You need to make sure that it also depends how you're running the business. So if you're running it full time, you need to make sure that you have enough of a safety net or a nest egg set aside to pay your monthly expense. You may need 6 months living expense aside because if you are the only income in the household, who's paying your mortgage and rent and health insurance and student loans or whatever you have out there. Money is one, so get your financials in order regardless. If you're looking to buy a business or not, you should know where you stand financially. That's one. Secondly, with a franchise specifically, you want to look at things such as, am I okay following a system? If you're buying a fast food franchise that serves burgers, are you going in saying, okay, I'm okay with the menu and I'm just going to run with what works? Or is your first thought, how can you change the menu? And usually that's a red flag. Not to say there's not any autonomy in running the business, but the intention is to run with that model. That's the advantage you're getting with a franchise. Things to think about. So financials is one. And you notice some of these questions pop up on the website. The second one is, can you follow a system? Really important because that's the value proposition of a franchise, right? They have the system built out for you so that you can easily execute and run with it. Some people like to create everything from scratch, and that's okay. Maybe not the best fit for a franchise, but that's really what a franchise is. They have the system, you run with it, speed to get open, which is a major advantage. And the autonomy comes with how you're running the day to day via the marketing, your roles, and things like that. And we're going to touch more on roles and characteristics of the business next. And the last thing, as far as financials and can you follow a system is time frame, because at the end of the day, you can spend as much as you like researching franchises, but ultimately with the franchise, if you're looking at a specific franchise, other people are looking at a franchise too, just like you're in the real estate market looking at a home or an investment property or building on the commercial side, that may not be available. So I always tell people, if you are looking to make a decision within six months or less, now is probably a good time to start considering a franchise, not to open, but to actually make that decision. Further than 6 months, if it's a year or two, it's okay to start the process, but not maybe dive into specific brands, because we don't know what's going to be available in the next year or two. That's something also to think about, is that with a franchise, it's going to be a location or a specific territory, and other people are going to be looking at that as well. So consider those three bullet points. I think is going to be super beneficial. And, hopefully you're getting a lot of takeaways. And again, if we're working together, we're going through all this, we're spending a lot of time, and that's done on our first call, which is that 20-minute intro call. So we'll figure out together kind of your current situation, what you're looking to accomplish, expectations of a franchise. We're going to go through things, and we'll touch on some here that there are over 4,000 franchise. So these are the stats that we give, 70 plus industries, all investment levels. They're, if you can think of a business model, there's a franchise, and not every franchise is created equal. So we go through that as well, and typically 20 minutes or less. Assuming how that call goes, if we both agree that a franchise may be a good fit, we schedule a second call. And prior to that second call, we send out a survey or a questionnaire that will give us a little bit more insights on your background, your experience levels, what your skill set is. Not just you have experience in the roofing business, but is it that transferable skill set of sales and things like that? So that it'll go through there. Will you have partners? If you're married, or are you going to have partners? Are they going to be involved, and at what capacity? Are they silent or active partners? What do they bring to the table? And once we get that back, we schedule kind of the second part, which is, what does the ideal franchise look like? So again, if a franchise isn't a good fit, no real reason to start looking at brands and doing all the extra work. It's really getting clear if a franchise could work. So that's kind of step one. Step two in finding your perfect franchise is, what does the ideal business look like? Now, this is really reverse engineering the process, because what most people do is they'll look at a company like McDonald's or Subway and say, okay, back in the day when I started looking, Subway was, I think, one of the top selling franchises at the time. And I said, okay, I can make it work. And what I found out was I was settling. I kept settling. Like, I didn't want a lot of staff. I didn't want to be open every single day. I didn't want to rely on a growth strategy of owning additional locations, which is, there's nothing wrong with, but just wasn't my ideal business when I wrote it down on paper. So you start to settle. So my challenge to you is, put all the brands aside. We don't even care about brands at this point. Is to set up a 60-minute consultation call. And if you're doing it on your own, and really, if you're, kind of listing out what the ideal business looks like. So let's go down some options. What is your role in the business? Are you going to be a full-time owner, leaving your full-time job, or are you going to be running this part-time, semi-absentee? You've heard that term. I've talked about it on previous episodes. Will you be relying on a general manager? Not all brands will require a general manager. Some could be run on your own without staff, maybe a few contractors, but are you okay with a manager? And if you are, keeping in mind that will increase your investment, because now you have an extra salary. So those are things to consider. Secondly, what do you enjoy doing? What are your skills? Are you an introvert, an extrovert? Do you enjoy sales? The role in the business is going to be big, because we tend to fall in love with the product or service of the franchise, forgetting what the role of the franchisee is. And you may love the idea of a certain service, but if it requires you to be the mayor of the town, and really network and go to events and podcasts and stuff like that, and that's not your cup of tea, that's going to be a difficult business to run. So really, concentrating on the role, and keeping in mind too that every every franchise is different. So you may have two franchises that offer the same service and or product, and the roles will be different. One of the brands will say mosquito spraying. Will have you going out there spraying for mosquitoes, building up a base, and then hiring staff. Another one will maybe never have you touching a blower and spraying for mosquitoes and have you networking day one. So same exact business service wise, but different, completely different roles. These are things to think about. Your employees is another category. What do your employees look like? I know it's an odd question, but your staff is going to be crucial. There are going to be certain businesses that require W-2 employees. Some are going to require 1099 contractors, and some are going to be a hybrid. So maybe your bookkeeper, your admin, your general manager, those are the W-2, the operational support. And then the people doing the actual work, we'll call it roofing and siding. Those are going to be contractors. That's an option. There are other businesses, executive recruitment, expense reduction, where you can run the business on your own and solely rely on 1099 contractors. Other things to consider with staff: are they full time, part time? Is it a larger staff? You're going to tend to see larger numbers in the cleaning space, whereas you're going to see maybe lower numbers in the water and smoke restoration mitigation space. With the larger numbers, you're going to need some type of background in management, right? Because you're going to be managing this larger staff. So those are things to think about. Do you prefer, traveling to a single location and running a shop, and maybe in a shopping center, standalone building, or do you prefer the flexibility of working from home where you're offering a service at a commercial property, residentially, cleaning, gutter cleaning and repair and replacement, roofing, painting, all that kind of stuff. So those are, again, the differences there. And, I'm not going to say one is better than the other, but, you have to look at, okay, at the end of the day, if I prefer the brick and mortar model, what is the growth strategy? And the growth strategy is simply to add on, the additional locations. So that's something to think about. So once you hit certain capacity, that each location can generate X, how many of those locations are needed, factoring in, what it costs to open up each one versus a service-based type of business where, you're territory based. So if you're buying one, two, or three territories of a specific brand, you're going to essentially incur some additional discounted, usually franchise fees for those additional territories, just like, you would pay with the brick and mortar option, but you would really kind of focus on the local market with the same team. If you have a team of three or two or whatever that number is, whether you buy one, two, or three territories, you're going to start off with the same team and slowly or gradually expand the staff once you hit certain capacity with your staff and employees. So there's definitely differences there, and we talk a lot more about that. That's a kind of that scalability is going to be kind of another show in and of itself. Those are things that we talk about in the consultation. If we haven't, what else as far as that? That is, a couple things we dive a little bit deeper. So the difference with kind of the service we offer versus a portal, instead of saying, okay, do you prefer brick and mortar or service? Do you prefer a low number of employees or a lot? If you've never owned the business, you may have a hard time deciding or not knowing the difference. And I always say, go with what your comfort level is. But what we do is we break down in that 60 minutes, okay, what's the difference between a brick and mortar aside from needing a physical location? We talk about the length of time we talk to get open, the investment. For a lot of the home service brands are up and running in 90 days or less. A brick and mortar non-standalone can take 6 months to a couple years to get open, depending on the complexity of the build out. Brick and mortar, if you're building something from scratch in a standalone building, so they're building the structure, or if they're just, essentially there was a restaurant in there and you're just changing it for your concept, that there's going to be some variables there, working with the landlord, negotiating leases. So tend to take a lot longer to get up and running. But these are the preferences, putting together the list of things that you want the business to have. And we get really selective. We want to make sure each business checks off all the boxes, as opposed to, let me just check off one box and not the others, and start to settle. Now you have a business that's kind of 50% of what you envision that business to be. That consultation, along with your responses from the survey you sent to us, give us a complete picture of what this ideal business looks like. And we summarize it in a franchise model, which is essentially, if you're doing it on your own, a summary. Just list those key areas, list your answers, and that's going to be part of your criteria search. We put it all together and really kind of help in what that ideal business looks like, so that any business, whether it's a franchise or even non-franchise, we want to make sure that we're using that model to gauge any business going forward. Between this call or the second step, the consultation that we just finished wrapped up here, we also want to talk about funding. I always, recommend speaking with the funding company directly. You have your financials together. We work with a company, both Benetrends or Fran Fund are two companies we work with, and they'll do a free, no cost analysis. There's no hard credit check. Usually it's a soft check to see kind of what you qualify for. They'll go through options like SBA, government backed loans. Believe it or not, there are some brands out there that, once approved by the SBA, will offer 100% financing. Not common, but there are a handful of brands that will do that. Typically, 20 to 30% is really is what you're looking to put down. Just say an average service-based brand is 150 to 200,000 all in, which is essentially the 90 days of operation, working capital, franchise fee, and all the costs involved to get the business up and running and to run for 3 months. We'll round it up, just say 200,000. You're looking at about 20 to 30%. So 40 to 60,000, and that 40 to 60,000 would be the down payment, and then the rest would be financed via the SBA. The use of retirement assets, this Rob's plan, rollover business startup, and those plans you get to utilize previous employers' 401k, an old traditional IRA, not a Roth IRA. If all your money's with your current employer, those funds will become qualified after leaving the employer. So something to think about as well. Some people use a combination of a retirement rollover and an SBA loan, and Benetrends or Fran Fund will be able to walk you through the process. Kind of like when you're buying a home, want to make sure that everything is in line, that you're qualified and looking at brands that you qualify for financially. But just because you qualify for up to 500,000, your comfort level may only be 200,000. So getting clear on what you qualify for and then what you're comfortable with are two different things.
So you've got your financial foundation in order, but that's just the starting line. Knowing your numbers is one thing, but knowing how to use them to unlock powerful funding tools like the Rob's Plan or an SBA loan is the key to actually opening your doors. To see how your personal finances plug directly into the most effective funding strategies, you need the complete playbook. Watch the full guide to franchise financing by clicking the link in the description.